Okay, so construction of the cockpit is completed, and to be honest doesn't look too bad. Straight out of the box type build, nothing fancy, nothing everything. Again, if you wanted to, you could pop in there with some more detail, harnesses, a little bit of wiring and things like that, but actually straight out of the box I don't think that looks too bad at all. Okay, so having a good look through your instructions, making sure you've got any holes that needed opening up on the insides of the actual fuselage, things like that, and then placing anything. So our point of view, we've got a tail wheel just going down in there, and then obviously we've got a spinner at the front. Usual thing, talks about spinners being freewheeling. This isn't radio controlled. Glue it in place because it's only going to snap if it jams, and then obviously you're trying to spin it, it's really not worth it. So first of all, before we even start to put things together with things inside it, we just want to see how well it fits anyway. So straightforward off the bat, you can see we're putting this together and this is bananaing. So what we're looking at is that this is not flat. Both of them aren't flat. So what happens is, when we come to put these together without any glue, as you can see, the back is out, the middle is bananaing. Now this isn't necessarily a bad thing, because a little bit of force and a bit of pushing in there, you can see actually it's not a bad fit. So we're checking the undersides. What we're really looking for is to make sure there's nothing that's interfering at the moment. Again, it's always a good thing to look. So just check your seams should be as good as you can possibly get. What can happen is obviously down in here we had some of the sprue attachment points, things like that. You can just have a little bit that's fouling it, sand it off, clean it, you're good to go. So if you know those two go together quite well, there's nothing to really stop you when this part is in. But again, we're not going to commit to glue, we're just going to place this in. So we're going to come in here and we're just going to line it up from how we can see it, and then down in here we got some little grooves that the cockpit will fit to. So hopefully that's in and in. So with that sort of in place without any glue at all, we're going to then reattach the other half, and we're just going to see how it goes, because we don't really want to get in here with glue and things like that if we've suddenly got a mass problem. And straight off the bat there's something not right here because it's not going, but a little bit of a click and we can see that is in, and the top is in there, and to be honest that doesn't look too bad at all. I think we're all okay. So nothing's fouling underneath, everything seems to line up and it goes together. So we're thinking probably not too bad. So what we can actually do now is glue this one in. To be honest with you, you've got two types of glue for this. You want a slower setting type glue. This just gives it that ability to be able to maneuver it once it's down in here, as well as obviously weld it deeply in position to hold it in position, because we're only going to be gluing one half in, the other half won't be because it will be held in place by the two fuselage. So what I like to use is something like a contactia glue. So as we know, it's got a bead of it is going to run underneath here. So we're just going to put a little bit of glue underneath there. And again, if you wanted to, you can add a little bit more on the sides here. But as we know, we've got a little bit of framework just comes up here. A little bit of framework just down in there. And again, there's a little bit just down in here. So with all of those back in, we can then just come along and we can seat it in again into these positions. And then we can give it a little bit of a nudge. And again, making sure it's thoroughly in on there. So we're giving it a nudge and we're looking inside the actual cockpit itself and just making sure that firewall down on the inside is pushed right in. Now this is a weld action glue, it's not going to take long, but if you wanted to, you could literally just come along with a bit of glue in here and just put a little bit more down in there just to make sure that's all in place and it's not going anywhere. The nice thing about using a thicker glue like this particular one, Contactia, or as we got Tamiya's white top, it's got that thing where if it's not perfect, you can wiggle it around, you can get it into there and get it to fit. The nice thing as well is because it's not like a pure liquid, it's not squeezing out over the top and then destroying your paintwork. So this area down in there with that bar running through, you can see there's a glue, there's a hint of glue there, you can see the shine of it, but it's not doing anything else. So we're quite happy of how that is. So that's pretty much in there. So you've got an option, you can leave that to dry just for a few minutes just like that. It's not going to take long, but you're happy with how it is, then you can come in and obviously put the other side in just like this. So from this point of view, because it's thin little edges pretty much all over this, we don't need to glue it with this stuff because that might just get a bit messy, it might be tipping everywhere, oozing out and causing damage. So from our point of view, the only thing we probably want to worry about is just this little bit under here, again just down in there, and then obviously this little bit of framework just down in here, and this one on here. Now the reason again for using this type of glue, a thicker glue, it will help it slide in. So if it's jammed up against it, it acts literally like a lubricant and helps it to go in as well. So with those two in there, what we're going to do is pop in. The only other two little areas we're going to do is obviously the back wheel just down in here. So this is going to marry up with these two, and the same with the front. We're just going to put a little bit of glue just on this front one, and then on the tail, because it's a little bit flat, which we'll talk about more in the other, we're just going to put a little bit of this in as well, just round there like that again. So we're all good. So literally flipping it over, and we're just going to start at the front, and we've got a nice fit there. We've got quite a nice fit across the back. We're pushing on that cockpit half to make sure it's in, and now this tail, because it's glued, we've just got some clips, and we're just going to come along and we're just going to clip the tail area all in place, just because it's got that little bit of glue around on those areas. And then again we're flipping it over, making sure this is in, it's in and it's square. Same thing again, we're just going to come from the other side, just put a little bit of glue just down in there, and then we are good. If you wanted to, you could clamp this top half and hold it all together, but actually, to be honest, this isn't a bad fit. It's not as bad as I thought we might get. So I'm hopeful that this is actually going to fit in here, no problem at all. Now we've got no glue in any of these areas just yet. So again, under here, we've got an area which is going to be obviously not seen at all because it's got covers on. We're going to use this thicker glue, and then we're just going to pop this just down in here because it's got a nice gap capability. And we're just going to pop this in like this. So usual thing, good old fashioned closed pegs. They're great for this type of job because they can just go in there, push in there, and you're good to go. If you want to use something a little bit nicer, you can obviously use clamps. So those are just all in there like that. This little guy here, we just maneuver that around. And then what we're going to do is leave it. We're just going to let that sit now for probably around about half an hour to bite and hold itself together. Then we're going to come in with extra thin, and we're going to go round and we're going to glue it all together on that one. So whilst we're doing that and that is drying off, what we'll do is just bring these down into play. So this is some of the other control points, and it's a bit about like when do you use glue. So again, we've got these ones down in here, so we're just making sure that obviously we've got a little bit of a raised bit of ejector pin down in there, so we just make sure that's flush and it's out of the way. And then again, we've got the other half of it down in here, and again we've got a little bit of ejector pin down in there, so we don't want that to do. But as you can see, you've got a situation, classic example of when it'll foul. That's a good one because it's probably high enough to get in the way. So again, we'll just pop in here, take that off. So we've got these, and then obviously we get the other halves for these ones. We've got tails. So this one in here, you've got a situation where obviously we've got it where this will come over the top. So as always, we will test fit just to make sure it's all good. And you can see it's got no big gaps in here or anything else that's going to be fouling. But the thing we have got, we just pull these apart. We've got a situation where we've got this lip area running down the back and a closed one here. Anywhere that's got a thick lip area like this, it's very hard for extra thin glues to penetrate evenly all the way round. So that's when we would use a glue like this. So using a thicker type glue just around here. And again, this is also, you have to look at how easy is it for this to clean up. So this is actually a doddle to be cleaned up. So we can just pop these down in here and we give them a good squeeze, and then hopefully you can see it just oozing slightly out on the other side, which is exactly what we want. And then again, we'll just grab some more little clips just to hold these in place and to make sure these edges stay nice and shut. What you can do is then use a thin glue on a brush just down in areas down in here, just to encourage that glue to sort of move around. But also, because it's just on an edge, it will weld that up quite tight and it will hold it all in there. And then another clamp, and you've got it all together just like that. So another example of that is here, because if you were coming along with glue and you're putting glues all round in here, it's going to dry by the time you come to put it together. And again, we'll test fit it to make sure it's all good. And that looks pretty darn good all the way around. We've got a little bit of flash on there, but it's on the outside, so we'll sand it off when it's together. So another good example of using a thicker glue. So we'll just come along with this. The reason I like Contactia glue like this is purely because it's got a weld action. So it will be welding this all together. And again, popping it down, getting it down in there, a little bit of a squeeze from the middle, just to encourage it all out to the outsides. And then again, you can come in with your little clamps, and we'll just pinch one of these just to go on there, and that will hold all of that together. All right, so again, same thing on a tail. We've got this big flat area all the way down here and then a hard edge. So what we will do is we will use the thick glue around the outside, and again that will nicely squeeze and come together. We'll do the locating tabs, but we won't do this edge in the middle because, to be honest, we'll do this by hand. And then again, that just comes in, and then a bit of a squeeze, ooze it out, but don't put your finger in it, because what you don't want to do is then touch it and then touch here, because otherwise that will happen. Hopefully you can see it. So you've got glue there, so we have to sand that out afterwards. So you're just trying to avoid that. Once it's together, we can just use the extra thin, and we can just pop it along this edge, because it's a nice little tight edge, and it will take care of it like that. And then again, bit of a nudge, and again you can use things like tweezers to come in and hold it together, or you can use scissors. It's another good one. So on edges, don't cut them, but you can just give it a nudge to squeeze that glue out without actually getting your fingers involved with it. So again, we'll tell you about getting rid of that glue mark in a moment. That's just down in there. So those are all in there just like that. And then again, we've got this wing section where we've got to put the top halves of the wings on with the lowers. We've already installed obviously the wheel well, and it's quite simple. So again, we test fit to make sure. So we've got a line running along here, which could be thin glue, and then obviously this doesn't look too bad, but it has got a little bit of a wobble. It's not wanting to hold, but we're checking it all over to see how this goes. And then down in here, there's a little bit of flash. So what we'll do, we're just going to sand that off, and we'll just check both sides of that. So happy. So again, popping it down and on, have a good look around it, making sure how it goes, how it's all looking. And then obviously this one also becomes part of the flap system, and again this is some of those areas, so you could spot it just there. We got a little bit of flash coming through, and again we'll just check the other side, because it's on one side, probably on the other. That actually looks pretty good now. But again, hard edge along here, so we could actually use a thin glue on this one because it's a nice tight edge along here and down and in, but it's a lot of area to do, so you'd have to do it in stages. So what we're going to do is going to put a little bit of the thick glue around here, because this needs to be buttoned down and together. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to put a little bit of thick glue just down on here. And then what we'll do is we're just going to put a little bit here on the actual little tab areas. But this one is a nice long thicker one, so we can actually glue that down in there. And this has got a nice big wide area for it down in there. So again, wide thick areas get glue, thin areas don't. So then again, we'll just pop this down. And then with that on, that'll be enough to all tack it down into position with any luck. And then we can come along with our thin glue, and we can then just do these joins down in here. And this join's got to butt up against the fuselage half, so you don't want glue sticking out of it and all these areas. So what we're going to do, we're going to pinch some of these just to hold this all into position. We've got a peg, so that can hold that front. And then what we've got is this leading edge all the way along here to do. So we call this, or I call it, the reverse action. So what you do, load up your brush, hold it upside down like this, and then we're going to come along from the underside and tap the underside and let the capillary action run up and underneath. Now the reason for not doing it this way is if you was to do it, it'll run off and guarantee it'll go to your finger, you end up with a fingerprint. But hold it this way means the glue will track along the bottom edge. So that then will hopefully take care of any gaps down underneath. And it goes in. So you can load up quite a bit of glue and just drag it along that leading edge of the wing all the way down here. And then again, if you've got some areas where you don't want to get your fingers in, use a pair of scissors just to pull them together, just to make sure that they're all working. And we've got no gaps along this leading edge whatsoever. We've got a little one just over here actually, so we use a little bit more glue just down in there. To be honest, I think that's pretty much got it. And we use the scissors just to pull it together and get the glue to ooze out if we can. You can see it along here, it's oozing out, which means it'll be a nice easy cleanup. But what we're mainly looking at is we know then we've got a really good seal. Okay, so if we look at it now, you can see nice bits coming out right the way through. And then on the back here, same thing, we've got this little join just down in here. So what we can do, if I just grab my glasses, we can have a look down. You can see we've got these little areas just down in here. So we're just going to pop a little bit of glue in each one of these. Again, quite a nice little design touch. So these other parts will be drying now. So now we can just pop these clamps in just to hold those down. And then again, we've got a little edge just down in here. And it's these little areas where you can just get in here with extra thin glue, and you can let the glue get around in amongst it all without any fear. Obviously the edge, you can just touch that in right away. And again, not too bad, but if you wanted to, you could get your brush down into here just to glue up those areas. But to be honest, it all looks pretty darn good as we speak. So this wheel well, just down in here, we've got that main glue in there, but what we can do is use the thin glue just to get properly in there and amongst it all, which I think that is. So again, you can give it a little bit of a nudge, and that is it. And that's how we get the wings. And then what we'll do, we'll show you about cleanup on this wing, but it's a nice solid one. You can see the beads of glue coming out of it, which means it's all good. So now we can probably undo these, and we're just going to check to make sure that this seal is nicely done for this wing one. It's quite important because obviously it needs to be a good fit, so it fits up on the other side. So what we do, we'll pop that back on there again just to hold that in. So there we go, that's the basics of obviously getting the wings. We'll do exactly the same on the other side. So really what we're talking about is big areas, big flat areas that come together, and obviously on wings and that you need a slower setting glue. So again, my favourite one is to use this one, which is the Contactia Professional. Really nice because it's very slow drying, gives you a nice little bit of wiggle room. It acts as a lubricant to help parts fit in and get in together and stuff like that. Again, so really good. So what we'll do, we'll pop back to this one now. So on here, if we undo these, they've got enough to hold this into place now. So what we need to do is, obviously we need a little bit of force just to hold this down into there. So again, you can use pegs, you can use friction clamps and stuff like that. Another way of doing it is to tack it with a little bit of super glue just to hold it into position. So then obviously just a tiny spot, glue the rest of it. But the rest of it is actually looking all pretty good on here and on with the tail and stuff like that. So what you can do is come along, you want to hold it into position the best you can to level it up to make minimal work. So have a good look at it. That doesn't look too bad. Then we're going to take the thin glue, and because we're on a wider area we should be able to get in, but we're going to put a little bit just down in that hole in there, and then obviously in this hole at the top. The capillary action will track underneath, and you can see by the glue coming up, so the paint coming up where it's melting it, how it's holding it into position. So that's pretty darn good. And then what we're going to do, we're just going to come along and we're going to touch whilst there's a little bit of a gap there. So literally just come along, touch, it drops into the gap, and then we can squeeze it together. And we're looking at it to make the best join we possibly can. And from our point of view, our eyes are always going to be drawn to this top edge. Then no one's really going to be looking at the bottom. So we're making sure that this is our best edge. So for any cleanup that we do is minimal on the top. And then this stuff doesn't take very long to dry at all. So then what we're going to do is we're just going to pop along with a little bit of glue, and we're just brushing it on the surface, and then we hold, and then obviously we sort of count for a little bit. We're happy of how that is. And then obviously we should be able to release, and then obviously we're a little bit too quick at the front here, so we're just going to add a little bit more glue at the front. And then what we're going to do now is over glue, as I call it, right the way through. So you can hold this upside down if it's a really tight curve. The whole point of over gluing is that if you have to do any sanding work at all, it's enough glue that's bitten right the way through, because if it's just on the surface, if you sand it, it will then release because you've got rid of the glued area. So you need enough glue to be able to go through right the way in there and glue that together. The great thing about obviously using this type of glue, which is obviously the quick set, it's dry to the touch almost immediately. So if you wanted to, you could grab a little bit of masking tape, or Tamiya tape in this case. You can just pop a little bit on the underside, wrap that right the way over, and that holds that in place. But the glue won't melt through because it's dry enough as it gone on here. Same goes under here, so we're just going to work the back end of this together. So again, looks pretty good. Come along, thin glue, loosely let it go, just a little bit. Let the glue go in between, then come together and then squeeze, and then it takes care of the seam. And then as you can see, that seam line is pretty much non-existent all the way under there. Once you're happy with it, then you can re-glue. But just remember, when you re-glue like this, what's going to happen is it's going to melt what was down there the first time. So if you're a little bit worried about how it's going to go, keep hold of it, because it might just all ping open on you. And then obviously we can hold, and then same thing. Once this begins to dry off and you're happy, you can take a little bit of tape if it's on a curve, because obviously trying to do this on an actual flat area isn't a problem, because you can put a clamp on. But if it's on a curve like this, we want it to be a nice straightforward curve. So we got the front and the back's done, and then same thing, we'll turn our attention to the front up here. And again, it's not the best fit and join, it's a little bit gnarly, you might notice along here, but what we're going to do is pull it together, and again we're just going to seat it as best as we can all the way in here. So we've got a little bit of a gap here, so that will allow the glue to go in and flow. And again, this is a nice big flat top, so it'll be fun to fill and take care of it. So we want it to be as best as it possibly can. And again, this I think is going to need a little bit of attention up here. So that's together. Once it's together, we pushed it in there, and as you can see, a little bit of oozing of the glue. And to be honest with you, we often talk about different types of plastic, hard and soft. I like this one because you can probably see when you squeeze this together, you get this sort of beading, and that's great because that means it's proper eating itself in there, and it's going to be a nice, like a weld, and that's exactly what we want. So again, once we've got a little bit in there, we're just going to over glue. So over gluing is just putting more glue on top of a glued area, but make sure you keep hold of it, make sure it's all together, and that's down in there. And then again, as that's all drying, we just grab a little bit more tape, if I can find the end. Normally I have these all lined up on a desk next to me, but didn't think that far ahead. And again, it's even holding itself, but I wouldn't trust it. Over time, it can come undone. So again, we'll just get that all down in there. That's all pretty good. This, as you can see, is already melting underneath. The tail's all going good. So then that's all pretty much good to hold itself together. So what we'll do is this particular one, we will leave it for around about an hour to totally dry. Because don't forget, what you've done is you've melted the plastic, you've softened everything. It will need to reharden. Once it's all in there and it's together, we'll unmask it all, and then we'll have a look to see if there's any seams and any joins that we need to do. To be honest, we are going to have to do some work here on the top, which is good because we can show you how to do that. But generally, these ones under here are holding together. And again, that cockpit's looking pretty darn good down in there. I think, again, this is the thing, you can't see much that's going in there, and by the time you've got the canopy on here, I won't worry about it at all. Again, that's looking pretty darn good. So there we go, that's the basics of actually construction gluing, getting them one to use them, so forth and so on. So what we're going to do, we'll let them dry, I'll get the other wing bits done, those other things to be together, and we can talk about actually construction work of getting it in there, and obviously a little bit of filler work on the fuselage.